Alright, y'all, it's me and I'm back. I already know this is going to be a long video. I will also make a abbreviated version of this, hopefully on my friend's blog post, or I'll make like a Google Doc or something, so that if you don't have time, you can just go ahead and read everything I'm about to say in this video and still be informed. But hopefully you do actually watch the entire video. Today we're basically going to be talking about the Aziz Ansari incident. You probably heard about it. If you haven't, I'll drop the link in the bio. Basically, what happened was this photographer met Aziz Ansari back in September, I believe it said, and they, kicked it off. They had a great night wherever they met and took pictures of each other and all that, whatever. They ended up going on a date, and the date did not go the way that she intended, and it did not go in a way that she was comfortable with. Now, I'm sure you've already heard about the story. Like I said, I'll drop the link in the description so you can read it yourself. The issue with this is the way that people are responding to this situation. A lot of people are blaming her, saying, well, what would you expect? You were on a date, so you should expect to have sex and expect him to expect to have sex, etc., etc. And why didn't you move away? Why didn't you just get out of there? Like, it sounds like you wanted it. So I'm going to go ahead and address this because I think that is complete BS. First of all, I think it's very important to note and understand that he's a celebrity, of course. She said, and I will read it to you verbatim. All right. She said, in the article, it says, Grace said it was surreal to be meeting up with Ansari, a successful comedian and major celebrity, and she was excited for their date. So at this point, from the way that she has, seen him on TV, and also, this also says there, he declared his support for the fight against sexual assault and harassment by wearing the Time's Up pin on the red carpet. And I believe he was also part of an episode, I don't watch him, an episode where they discussed sexual assault and they wanted to intentionally depict this character as something that everyone would love, and then have to be shocking that he was actually capable of sexual assault. Now, so he's already painted this image of himself to be, the kind of guy, the kind of man who supports women. I need my chapstick. The kind of man who supports women. So going on this date, she would expect, I trust him. He's a beloved celebrity. He's fighting for women's rights. He's standing up for what's right. He wore the Time's Up pin. And this is a lot about the movement because it's very easy to wear the pin and not actually support it with your actions. But that's a different story. So she met up with him thinking, hey, I can trust this guy. He's a friend of women. He is defending us and he is standing up for us and he is having these hard conversations. And I have some experience with a situation that's very similar to this, where someone that I trusted ultimately ended up betraying my trust and ended up, violating me. And because of that experience, I know exactly how she felt in this situation, and I don't think a lot of people understand it. So I'm going to go ahead and break it down to you. When you trust someone and they do something to hurt you, you go through a shock. People seem to forget, but it's not just fight or flight. It's fight, flight, or freeze. And if you do any research about any sexual assault survivors, you will find out that freeze is the most common reaction. Not everyone is comfortable physically fighting back, and I'll explain why. So when that happened to me, and this is probably how she was feeling as well, I went through a shock, and I was like, is he really doing this right now? I made it very, very clear that I don't want to mess around with him right now. I don't want this, but he kept on persisting, and he kept doing it anyway. So it's like that initial shock of, wow, this person I trust is blatantly disregarding how I feel and is okay with hurting me. And so you just spend a while trying to process that feeling and process that betrayal. Think about a time someone has betrayed you. And I'm sure a lot of you were in shock, wow, how could this person do this to me? On top of that, dealing with that shock, that realization that someone could hurt you and that they're capable of sexually violating you, you don't know how far they could go. They might not stop at just sexually violating you. For me, I was afraid to, like, I always told myself, if I ever get in a situation, I'm going to punch him in his face, I'm going to kick him in his face, I'm going to choke him out and run. But in that situation, I didn't do that because I was afraid of what else he might do as well. Because he's already proven to not be who he showed me to be. He was already proving that I couldn't trust him. He was already proving that he didn't care about my well-being or how I felt, that he just cared about doing what he wanted. So how am I supposed to know if he's going, like, where he's going to stop? I don't know where the boundary line is for him anymore because I thought it was here. And now it's all the way over here. So who knows how far it'll go. So if I try to punch him or whatever, he might end up punching me. And that would be an even more difficult situation. So that's part of why people don't, forcibly, force themselves to force their way out of the situation, because you don't know what's going to happen or how they're going to retaliate. They could get angry and it could become a more aggressive situation than it already is. Beyond that, when you're in that shock kind of mode, just think about an experience where you were just shocked, just completely shocked. Even just like watching a TV show where you're just shocked and you just sit there and you're just like, and you're processing. And it's hard to think in that moment. Now, take that and multiply it by 1,000, because this is a real experience and this is not a TV show. This is something that directly impacts you in his home. It's not you hearing about something that happened like way down the street or to a friend of a friend or whatever. This is something that's happening to you. When you deal with that shock, it is very difficult for the brain to function in the way that it normally does. And at that point, you're paralyzed. You can't think, you can't function. For me, when I dealt with my one of my assaults, I realized much later that I actually had pepper spray in the room. It wasn't anywhere I could reach it, but it was there. And in that moment, I couldn't even think about how my pepper spray was there. I was just in shock and I was scared, and I was just hoping and praying that it would hurry up and be over with, and I would get to go and I would never have to see him again and never have to talk to him again. And for some of you, it might be very difficult to understand that, but shock is paralysis. You can't always think logically, and even if you can, you may not trust that you'll be able to execute it in a way that won't anger him or whatever. So people are like, why didn't you leave? Well, she probably thought she couldn't. And for those of you who are saying, well, she should have expected this, it's a date. It's a date. They didn't meet on Tinder. And even if they did, that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a hookup. It was a date. They met in a cute kind of way. They were taking pictures with each other. She gave no indication that she was DTF. He gave no indications that he was intending to, do that either. So it was like a romantic date. They went on a dinner, etc. Her going out on a date with him is not obligation for her to sleep with him. One more time. Going on a date with somebody is not an obligation to sleep with someone or for someone to sleep with you. The way that consent works is that it requires an enthusiastic yes. Not the absence of a no, but the presence of a yes. And if you think that's stupid, then just go ahead and play it safe and just ask for permission in the first place. And if you think that asking for permission is going to ruin the mood, then clearly you're not horny enough to be having sex to begin with, and that sex would be whack. So just go ahead and stop. I'm so angry that we're having to even have this conversation. Nobody